Morning.
Good morning, Becky.
Sorry, I was a couple minutes late. So I've been having a little trouble when I do a connect through the appointment thing, and it somehow with the iPad it's not right. So then I have to go type it in, and anyway, so anyway, I'm here.
Glad you're here. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I really just thought it would be nice, since there are so many new members of the delegation. I thought it would be nice and we have board members who are relatively new, and some that just came on this year. So I thought it would just be nice for everybody to be able to put a face with a name, for one thing. And in the past, when we've had these lunches and times together, more casual times have been better, just to really kind of get to know each other, so that as you guys get into session, it's easier for one of us to be able just to pick up the phone and give you a call if we have a question or a concern about something. So, and obviously there are, many education issues that are at the top of our minds. And I know you probably don't know very many specifics right now, but we just wanted to share those that are really kind of at the highest point of our list. And so that was really what I thought would be great to accomplish. And I don't want to keep everybody, more than an hour, so we can try to be concise in what we share. But anyway, hopefully you've gotten a copy of the legislative priorities that our board approved last month. And so hopefully you have that and you can take a look at it. But first, I thought maybe we could just do kind of quick introductions, so that everybody can just have a second to say who they are and how long they've been in their role, and whatever you'd like to share. So I'm Susan Horn. I'm the chair of the Board of Education. I'm just this year in September began my second term representing the 5th district. And so that's me. So I'll just call on people if that's okay, because it's hard to see what order you have everybody on your screen. So maybe let's just go through and introduce the board members from Knox County first, and then we'll do and then Becky, you can lead us through the delegation. Would that be all right? Okay, so Patty, make sure you unmute.
Patty Bounds. I'm midway through my second term on the Board of Education.
All right, Daniel.
Daniel Watson, just newly elected in August of this year to District 3 on the Board of Education. And my wife and I run the Restoration House, and we have 3 kids, two are in Knox County schools.
All right, thank you. Betsy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy Henderson. I represent the 6th district here in Knox County. And I've got 2 children in Knox County schools. They're home today, so if you see them running around the background, just ignore that. And I was elected in November.
Yeah, so Betsy's brand new. She's been to a couple of board meetings, so we're glad she's on board. Virginia.
Virginia Babb. I am in my 3rd year of my first term, and I'm in the 4th district, which is West High School is the one high school in my district.
All right, Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Owen. This is the beginning of my second term representing District 2.
All right, and Bob, are you there?
Yes.
You just want to say hello?
Yes.
There
yes,
he
I'm
is.
here. Yes, Bob Thomas, Superintendent.
Thank
you for joining us this morning. Appreciate everyone being on the Zoom meeting.
Thanks for being here, Bob. I think he can't stay too long. He has a principal's meeting coming up in a little while, but he can join us for a few minutes.
Yeah.
All right, and I think that's everybody from our side.
Okay. Good morning, and it's always good to to be with you all. It always is a little more fun to be in person, but we're making do in these extraordinary times. But I'm Becky Massey. I serve here in the state Senate. We have two and a partial state senator, although the partial is worth more than the two combined. But I've been in the legislature since I was a special election fall of 11, and I serve as chair of the Transportation Committee, and have been. We get our assignments next week. And have been on the Health and General Welfare Committee. So, and then I serve as chair of the Knox County delegation. So my unofficial title is mom. So anyway, okay, and I'm just gonna go in order that I see them on mine. So Senator Briggs, why don't you go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Richard Briggs. I'm getting ready to start my 7th year in the state Senate. I'm the junior senator from Knox County after the Lieutenant Governor and Senator Massey. And I know a lot of you that have been, that are on the school board already, and I'm meeting some of you for the first time by Zoom, but I think we've always had a pretty good relationship between the legislative delegation and the school board. And I really want to see that continue, where we can always have open communication, even if we disagree on something.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Briggs. And one of our new members, Representative McKenzie, and then Representative Zachary, you're on deck.
Good morning. Good morning. Hopefully, I'm new to the House, but not new to Knox County. I spent eight and a half years. I was actually sworn in. Senator Briggs and Representative Wright now sworn on the same day for Knox County Commission. Felt like eons ago now, but I just look forward to continuing this relationship. You know, I was we had a joint committee on education, commission, school board, so I got to know. I know Patty was on that group, that inaugural group, but just look forward to continuing the good relationship that we have.
Thank you. Representative Zachary and Representative Johnson, you're on deck.
Good morning. Thank you, Becky. Good morning to everyone. It's good to be with you. Jason Zachary, I'm District 14, which is Deep West Knoxville. Going actually into my 4th term, and with the retirement of Bill Dunn, I actually become the senior member of the House, which is crazy. We've got so many new members, so I look forward to working with Sam, Michelle, and Eddie, and then obviously Justin and Dave. We got a great delegation statewide. Knox County is always considered the best delegation. We work so well together. Worked so well with Senator Massey, Senator Briggs, and Lieutenant Governor McNally. Worked so well with our county commission, the school board, our mayors. Again, as I believe Sam and Dr. Briggs said, we may not always agree, but the lines of communication have always been open, and that just benefits the people that we all represent. So I look forward to our time together and look forward we can actually be face to face with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Johnson and then Representative Carringer's on deck. Representative Johnson, you're muted. There you go. There you go.
Headed into Gloria Johnson here, and I'm headed into my 3rd term with a little break in between. But excited to get started. Excited to see what we can do for you guys this year, and what we can do for all the kids in Knox County. So just happy to be here. I heard you guys are working. I know it's a tough year, and I just want to make sure that we're all here to see what you guys need and what we can do. So it's just good to see everybody this morning.
Thank you. Representative Carringer and Representative Manis is on deck.
Thank you, Becky. I'm Michelle Carringer, and I'm getting ready to start my 1st year with legislation. This will be the 112th year. We have a good freshman class coming in, and I'm just looking forward because Knox County, I feel like Knox County is the leader in all things in the state of Tennessee, because this is where we all love to live and choose to live. So I'm just looking forward to to having everyone hopefully be able to come down to Nashville and see us. I just want you to know that my door is always open. And I want to say hello to one of our newest neighbors, Jennifer Owens. Just moved in down the street from me back before Christmas. And hello to my neighbor, Superintendent Bob Thomas. So District 2 and Beverly Oaks has a lot at stake right here with our Knox County education. So just looking forward to working with everybody and continuing to move Tennessee and Knox County forward in all ways. And of course, education being at one of the top ones. So thank you, Becky, and thanks to all of y'all for being here this morning to share with us.
Thank you, Michelle. And Eddie, you're next, and then Justin Lafferty.
Thank you, Becky. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I don't have my live video on. I'm actually driving in between meetings, so I'm really trying to multitask this morning and drive and talk at the same time. So thank you all for getting together this morning. I am entering my 62nd day as a state representative. I think it's the 62nd day as a state representative. And, I was excited about this call this morning. Education has always been a priority with me. When I was running for mayor, even as city mayor, I made education one of my platforms. And I have a passion for education. Yesterday, we were on the freshman class was on a legislative leadership session, and we talked about several things throughout the day. It was about an 8-hour session. We got to education last, and I was feeling pretty good until we got to education. And then I'm like, oh man. So I know that you guys have lots of challenges, and I want to do everything possible as state representative for District 18 to help however I can. So thank you for having me this morning.
Okay, thanks, Eddie and Justin. And we've got just an FYI, I've got Dave Wright texting me trying to get in. He's having technical difficulties, so I'm going to be working on helping him get connected. And the Lieutenant Governor had a prior engagement and couldn't join us. So actually, we've got really good attendance this morning for something we set up 2 days ago. So 2 or 3 days ago. So thanks. Justin, you're on, and I'm going to
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Dave.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Justin Lafferty, 89th District. Starting my second term as a state legislator, and I represent largely Hardin Valley, Carnes, some stretches down into the city limits there along Western Avenue into Tillery Road Merchants area. And looking forward to another great year of great things for Knox County and education.
Very good. Is there a phone number to call in for this this thing? Eddie, are you on a phone, or I think Dave's trying to get in by a phone number.
I am on the phone, Becky, but I just zoomed in via phone.
Through your app? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You're still mute, Susan.
I can ask our tech people to give him a call if that would be easier, helpful.
Yeah, that would.
You want to shoot his number?
I'll give you his number.
Okay,
thanks.
Great. Okay. So I want to, and I'm glad that Superintendent Thomas is on here. So if I say something wrong, he can correct me. But just to kind of start the conversation and give you guys an idea of, where we are in the whole process of kids in school and everything right now. We in the summer, I think families were a little frustrated. I think they're getting in touch with Dave. So in the summer, families were frustrated because they didn't know what school was going to look like and all of that. But I feel like the superintendent and his team really thoughtfully went through a very comprehensive plan. And even though it wasn't as quick as people would like, it was very comprehensive. And so when finally everybody did understand what the plan was going to be, and we got into the school year really went much more smoothly, I think, than we all thought it would. So we were able to, the superintendent, and, just so you guys know, the school board is authorizes the superintendent to make decisions about, snow days and inclement weather days when school's in or out. So that is the same extends for the time that we're in currently with whether a school is in person or virtual. So, excuse me, I'm passing this number along in case they need it. Okay. So anyway, the superintendent really took the approach of working directly with the health department. They meet with the health department, weekly, sometimes twice a week, daily, whatever is needed, and work very closely with them, and really took the approach of looking at each individual school, what the stats were for each school based on attendance, teacher attendance, student attendance, and then also the substitute fill rate. So some schools had to move from an in-person status to a red status, every now and then. But as far as the district goes, we were in a yellow status. So those students that wanted to be in person were in the buildings, all except the very last week of school, and then we moved to a red status. So I was very pleased that we were able to do that. We had, in looking at schools or the listing of schools and how many cases were in each school and that kind of thing, we had schools that had 0 cases of COVID in the teachers or actually the staff at large, and then other schools where there were no cases with students. So we were really thankful to be able to have students in the buildings. We started the fall season with about 30%, roughly. I'm not sure where the number shook out. It started out at 30 and some changes may have been made as we got into the semester, but 30% were virtual, and now we have about 5,000 kids who've come back into the building. So I think we're at about 25% virtual. And the superintendent has been very forthright all along that we know that students learn better in the classroom with a teacher. And I think that is, I think for the past several years, there's been conversation around how I think teachers have felt threatened in the past because of technology, that they may not be as needed. But I think that what we've seen is that teachers are more needed than ever. And that personal, we've talked a lot about that as a board over the past few years, that personal connection with a teacher is vital. And so that's certainly what we've seen. The difficulty has been, I'm all about parents, being able to choose during this time if their kids are virtual or if their kids are in person. I think sadly we have some kids that are virtual that ought to be in person, and so that's the hard thing, being able to provide that option for families, but at the same time, we know those kids need to be in school. So that's really tough. And there are some kids that, I know this goes for students across the country that school systems, can't get a hold of. They can't find them. They can't. And so, I saw the numbers recently. I don't remember what they are, but a lot of our people have done home visits to try to touch base with families, and so that is a huge concern. When you can't both virtual, just having kids that you're not seeing day to day. We all know that there are kids who come to school and have refuge from difficult family situations. They come to school to eat, in addition to having, the academics. So there are definitely a lot of concerns right now. And always, every time we have these conversations, I feel like we're always talking about funding. And, but 87% of our budget is made up of our staff and our benefits. And so people deliver our product. And so we always, it just always goes back to the fact that we need more, we always need more boots on the ground. We always need more people delivering this product to kids because students are getting needier and needier in a variety of ways as we go along before COVID, much less now. So when we went into the budget season this past spring, we really had several, we were going to hopefully be able to add several things into the budget that would help us increase the mental health supports that we needed, to increase more RTI, and to really try to target these areas that need more attention. And of course, not knowing what revenues would look like, we pulled back on a lot of that. Our teacher salaries, we'd really love to give our teachers an extra or a bump in salary. And so that all of those things we had to pull back on. So we've been very happy to see that revenues are coming in much stronger, of course, than we all expected. But our funding, of course, is always an issue. So before we go on, I'd like to welcome Dave Wright. I think he's on the phone. Hey, Dave. Can you hear us? You're muted. Okay, well, hopefully he'll pop in and let us know he can hear us.
He's off mute now, looks like.
Okay. Hey, Dave. Dave, it's Susan Horn. Oh, and Ebony's on here. Ebony Satterfield.
Hi, Susan, I'm here.
Hey, could you just introduce yourself real quick? Just let everybody know how long you've been on the board and who you represent, what district.
Yes, no problem. Hi, everyone. This is Becky Satterfield, Knox County School Board Representative for District 1. Happy to be here.
All right, thanks for joining us. Okay, they're working on getting Dave, so when he is able to, we'll hopefully have him introduce himself real quick. So I don't want to do all the talking. I would love for other board members to hop in. There's definitely other issues that we are concerned about relative to specifically to COVID. So does somebody else want to hop in? Or does anybody have any questions about just the kind of how things are going in the schools, or, anything like that before we really get into like the specific priorities?
Susan, this is Richard Briggs. I wanted, as we go through this, yesterday we got a letter from the governor's office about some of the ESSER funds that are coming down that's related to COVID. And I was just looking at it. It looks like Knox County is going to get almost $51 million with this. Yeah. And as we go through, how will that $51 million be used, and how does that fit in with some of the priorities that the school board has?
Yeah, I don't know if our board members know that, because I just saw the information late last night. Jason sent it to me. And so I literally had to look at the report about 4 times to make sure that I was accurately looking to see, does this really say $50 million? So it does. I've looked at it several times now. And so I will let Superintendent Thomas speak to that. I know, just my initial thoughts. Since our salary component is such a huge percentage of our general purpose fund, when you can't use funds for recurring expenses, you're much more limited in what you can do. But we've spent we estimate about $10 million in additional funds this year on COVID, related expenses. And Superintendent, do you want to speak to that and maybe share your thoughts on it?
Oh, hey, Susan, I did want to add one thing, that they do the math as equally as they can. So it's down to $50,810,033.58.
Yes.
So I mean, they don't round. They I mean, I would round.
I know.
Yeah.
I saw the report. It's like, yeah, one district had 123 million and then down to the cents. So
yeah. So
yeah.
anyway, I
So
thought that was interesting, but I was excited to see that also.
Yeah, it's a significant amount of money. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, if we can get, all the retired teachers we know to come back and, temporarily sign on to work with kids. And so anyway, I'll let Superintendent Thomas speak to it.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And I wish I could be more specific. We haven't received guidelines yet. Generally speaking, on federal dollars, there are guidelines in the way that you could spend that money. So I'm sure our State Department of Education will be getting those out hopefully very soon. I do hope the $50 million plus is accurate. That'd be great. And we just have to see what the guidelines are before we can determine how we use that money. But it certainly would be helpful. And as Susan mentioned, we've spent about $10 million of unbudgeted funds so far that COVID related. The biggest bulk of that was starting our virtual learning program. I think about $7.5 million budgeted there, and to be able to offer two platforms, the in-person model and also the virtual model. And then substitute teachers, we've spent about $700,000 there. Student interventions, $100,000 there. Personal protective equipment, we spent about $1.5 million, and then about $200,000 on signage. So again, about $10 million. Some of that will be recurring, maybe not all of that. And but we would anticipate, hopefully the pandemic, we're going to be out of that at some point here in the near future. But we would anticipate continuing a virtual program, even absent of the pandemic, because and maybe not as large as it is right now. And Susan's right. I think we've got about 45,000 plus in person, and maybe 14,000 that are virtual, had 5,000 come back. So we would anticipate continuing a virtual program, maybe not to that extent as large as it is at this point, but those funds were unbudgeted. My sense would be that maybe there were going to be some strings attached to the money, that it could be used in that way, which certainly would help, because again, we've got those expenditures, and we'll see and keep the board informed, and as soon as we know what the guidelines are, for spending that money.
And Superintendent Thomas, Virginia, I see your hand. Let me say one more thing. One thing I failed to say, I think it was in April, the superintendent came to our board and asked us to move our district to a one-to-one device deployment, so that we would be able to educate students even if everyone is at home, because we were nowhere near that kind of technology for our students. So we approved that right away, and because they acted very quickly, they were able to work directly with Dell to order exactly what we needed with exactly the specs that we needed for each Chromebook, and we were able to get those in before school started in August. So if the superintendent and his team hadn't acted quickly on that, we would have been in a difficult situation going into the fall. But of course, the reason we had not done that before was not because we didn't think it was a worthwhile thing to do, but because of funding. So we were able to use the first CARES Act funding to be able to fund this year's portion of that, with some money for next year's portion of it. So if I'm looking at I think it looks like that we can use these funds through September 30, 2023. So that will assist us now for more time than we initially thought. So that's very helpful. And we still have teachers that need additional new laptops that we haven't been able to purchase and that kind of thing. So those will be some things that we're also looking into.
Let me say one more thing, Susan, too, about what that $10 million did not cover. We are anticipating $5 to $7 million in terms of an annual expense to keep the one-to-one program going. So This money, if it goes through September 23, what we were looking at from a budget perspective in our early conversations about budget was setting aside or budgeting $5 to $7 million just in order to keep the one-to-one going. So that would, if we can use that money towards that purpose, then that certainly helps us to free up $5 to $7 million that otherwise would have been budgeted toward technology. So I wanted to be sure and throw that in there because that would help tremendously.
Right. Virginia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I had not heard about the 50 million until this morning, so that's thrilling, and I know we're all going to be excited to find out where exactly that money can be used because I know it'll help. But I think where we really talk about budget with you guys is really looking at a lot of the ratios that y'all have for funding models, and it really gets down to nurses, mental health. I mean, and I don't have my numbers right in front of me, but we really want to staff and have the BEP staff nurses, mental health, social workers at a much lower ratio. And that's something that's not going to be covered with this kind of money and really is going to take the legislature looking at the BEP funds. And I think that continues to be just one of our biggest concerns. And I think with COVID, the need for all of those social workers, mental health workers, nurses is more dire than it has ever been. And those professionals are so stretched in our school system and are taking care of way too many children. I mean, our kids' needs are just not being met by the ratios that we're being funded at. And so that's really the thing I wanted to drive home about that. But obviously I'm thrilled that this money can come in and help with some of the other needs that we're going to need to fund.
Yeah, one of the issues that I know you guys are probably aware of and that we've heard a little bit out of Nashville about is holding schools harmless, relative to BEP, holding schools harmless for this year because that the BEPs are calculated on ADM, and so our average daily membership is lower now because some families have chosen to pull their students out and homeschool them. So not virtually through Knox County, but just to homeschool them. And so we have about 2,200 students that were Knox County students last year that are homeschooling right now. We assume that a lot of those students will come back to Knox County at some point. So that is why the request has been made for school districts to be held harmless because with such a high percentage of our budget being for staff, if our BEP reflects that the current ADM that we have, we would have to cut staff. Meanwhile, when we get into August, and if those students do come back, then we would need to hire staff that we wouldn't have the budgeting for, since the daily membership numbers are calculated using the end of school year numbers. So they'll be calculated. Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's April or May of this school year that we're currently in. Whatever that time, I'm not sure of the exact day, but it's based on our current for this year.
Right.
So,
the state looks at the 20-day periods, which there are 9 of those. They look at periods 2, 3, 6, and 7, and it's prorated. The membership's prorated based on those membership periods, and that's what we're funded on. And we went back and looked at last year's number for period 3. And this year's number for attendance period 3, and we're down about 2,200 students, which could mean without holding harmless, it could mean about $8 million less in BEP funding just because of our membership being down. And I think Susan's exactly right that we would anticipate many of those students coming back to us at some point. So, and then we've gotten, I think on the average, maybe about $10 million of growth over the years in BEP. So the hold harmless, if we could make sure that the membership, we were funded at that level, plus get the growth money if there's any growth money coming this year. So that kind of explains why we would like to, for y'all to consider holding school systems harmless.
Yeah, and the growth piece is really very important because we're very concerned about, Jennifer can give us the exact numbers, but we're very concerned about our teacher pay, and we need it to be higher because we continue to lose teachers to the surrounding counties. And so a lot of that, when we get an additional $8 to $10 million of growth per year, that's a big piece of how we would be able to fund those raises, because to give our teachers 1% of a raise, well, to give our teachers 4 percentage points of a raise, Bob, isn't it about $14 million?
Yes, it's roughly about $3 million for every 1% on teachers' salary increases.
So it's $12 to $14 million when we give teachers a 4% raise. So we really need, we kind of count on having a growth of 8 to 10 million per year to be able to even think about doing that. So when we've heard hold harmless, batted around, but we just wanted you guys to understand that can mean different things to different districts. So to us, it's really about those two things. So,
hey, Susan, if I can jump in just quickly, it's Jason. It's important as we have this conversation, it's important to remember that we as the legislature, the governor, we've been listening. I have probably had more communication with Dr. Bartlett, Gina Bird, Wes Edmonds, the principals in my district over the last couple of months than I've had over the previous 3 terms, just because of the concern about students, the concern about teachers, the concerns about just keeping the schools open. And so as we kind of talk through all these issues, the reason we're having that special session the week of the 18th is because we want to make sure we focus on the issues. And the governor, on the call that we had with him last week, he laid it out. He said, we're going to discuss, the special session will focus on learning loss recovery, literacy, holding schools and teachers harmless, and funding. He was really clear about everything we're talking about. We're to be focused on that particular week. And it's just important to remember, not only just for us, but for the community, for the parents and people who are watching now, is that's the reason we're having a special session just to focus on these educational issues. It'll look similar to how the end of our session looks, where we kind of go into a flow motion and we focus on educational issues and we quickly move those. We debate it, deliberate, vet it, but we move those quickly through our committee system. So that way we can address these issues now versus waiting till April and May when we typically address them, because the last couple of years we voted to hold teachers harmless. We addressed testing because we've had so many challenges. We've addressed that. Well, us as the legislature, the governor made the decision that we don't want to wait. We don't want to put our community, not just the teachers, but the entire community, we don't want to put everyone through that uncertainty, because we have enough of that with this pandemic. So as we're kind of walking through this and we're talking about funding and the BEP, the challenges we have as a donor county, those are all issues we're going to address. And we're going to have an entire week that's just going to be focused on these issues. And so my ask would be for you guys is just to text us, especially as we get closer to that week. Just text us and let's just make sure we're having really, really good communication about as next week, as we discover what some of these issues are going to be. We've already seen the $100 million initiative of literacy that the governor rolled out a couple of days ago. As we all gather more information, just make sure you guys are texting us and communicating with us, and make sure those lines of communication are open. So that way we can take the thoughts and views and ideas of you guys, we can take those to the legislature and maybe make some tweaks and adjustments. But we're going to get many of these issues we're talking about, they're going to be fixed in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be able to put most of this behind us. Is it going to be perfect? No, but we're going to be able to address so many of these issues that it's going to alleviate so much stress and allow us just to focus back on these students, on these teachers and these administrators. And let's keep schools open till the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I that, having some of that information will be definitely very helpful to know sooner rather than later. And if we could, if everybody would, I tell you what, maybe we can ask Terry Coatney, our board secretary, to gather cell phone numbers to distribute to, so that we can exchange those numbers, because you guys are so busy when you're in session, and it's so difficult to be able to communicate. So if you can get a text while you're in a session and look at it, and that's the best way, that would be great, if we could do that. And So we'll work.
And
on-
Susan, I can get you all of our members.
Okay, that'll be great. Thank you, Becky.
I just want to say thank you for bringing that up, Susan. I think that is really important. And Jason, also, thank you for everything you're doing in Nashville. I think those two pieces for the BEP are really important. And thank you for your leadership on that.
I would just like to ask for everybody to please stop using the term learning loss. It's not a real concept. It's not an educational concept. It's a political term. It's very upsetting to educators when you use this term learning loss, because like I said, there's no way to measure it. It's not an actual thing, and it is not an educational term. And I think it's important that we speak in educational terms. We've got learning interruptions and we've got gaps, but learning loss is not an actual educational term. And I don't think we should really be using these political terms when we're talking about, with educators.
Okay, and just it was mentioned earlier, and especially since we have so many new people in general, it's kind of difficult to hear. I'm very visual, so it's difficult for me to hear this and not see it. But if you do have a copy of our legislative priorities that we gave you, just so you kind of understand the BEP differences that we're talking about. Like, for instance, for example, school nurses, the Association of School Nurses, which I'm not going to get any of these associations correct. So please, I don't have that written here. So don't take me on exactly what that agency is, but they recommend one nurse per 750 students, and the BEP funds one nurse for every 4,500 students. So that's a gap of $3.6 million that, that if we could, if we had more money in BEP for that particular item, we could have more nurses, but it's 3.6 million. The difference in guidance counselors is $11.5 million. Social workers is $16 million. The BEP funds one nurse for every 3,700 students, and the recommendation is one social worker per 250 students. And mental health professionals, the gap is about $2.5 million. So that gap is just under $34 million for those four items combined. So this is, one of the difficulties with the public understanding why we don't have more personnel in our schools. It all goes back to the BEP. So let's see. And it could be that I'm seeing that the BEP for nurses could even be less than it was. That number may not be correct, but it's a significant number, especially when you add them up. So that's the school system knows full well that we need more staff in our schools, but we already fund a tremendous amount of staff over and above the BEP. So, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. So I wanted to reemphasize what we're talking about with nurses and guidance counselors and social workers, mental health professionals. The thing that I have been overwhelmed with since the start of COVID is that any vulnerability that a family or student had prior to COVID was only accentuated. I mean, COVID did not diminish or eliminate any vulnerabilities, right? It only heightened them. And so if we consider all the vulnerabilities that families might have been experiencing prior to COVID, there's much work to be done. And so all I would ask is you all as legislators, that if you focus your attention to the most vulnerable in making the decisions through the legislature, I think what we would end up finding is that we're going to meet the needs of most people. Because as the vulnerable are taken care of, everybody else seems to be taken care of too. But if we're not focused and prioritized on the most vulnerable, then we often miss large swaths of our communities. And so, these nurses and guidance counselors, social workers, mental health professionals, and a lot of other things that happen in education, that we need, that we're underfunded for, are really targeted toward those who are most vulnerable. So that's what I would just ask you to do, is keep the most vulnerable in mind in all the decisions that you're making.
Any other board members have anything you would like to add?
Susan, I'm going to drop the link to the BEP Blue Book in, so everyone will have those numbers so they can refer back to them.
Great, thank you. And, you know, and just because we have so many people who are new, and maybe Becky or Jason or Richard, you guys can jump in, but just so everybody understands, you know, we recognize that most of these decisions begin and are really decided in subcommittees or in the committees. So by the time they come to you on the floor, you know, they're pretty much, you know, finished. Does somebody want to address, like, I know just for us, kind of what that balance should be for us? We need to obviously be speaking to those members who are on the education committee. And you don't know yet what your committees will be. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You have kind of an idea, possibly. I mean, you know, a lot of people that have been on committees tend to stay on the same committees. There is some movement, but we officially get ours next Thursday in the Senate. I guess the House probably gets it maybe the same day. But basically, your all's two most important committees are the education committees and the finance committees. Those two are the ones that really will make the biggest difference and then also the leadership of the speaker, the majority leader, the leadership of the things, each house, because they meet weekly with the governor. We can advocate, we can carry legislation that is education related, but if we're not on education committee, it's a lot harder for us to be there when they take that vote on things. The House has subcommittees, the Senate does not. And I think their subcommittees are a little more focused on whether it's higher ed or K through 12. I think it's instruction. But so that's really where you need to spend your most time. And like I say, we'll see next week on who's on which committee. And actually what we can do is I can wait till next week to get you the cell numbers to also give you the committee assignments of each of the members. And we'll get that so you can kind of see who's on, which ones we're on. And then of course, the state website is really, I think, really well operated, where you can see how things are flowing and moving and things like that. So.
Thank you. Anything else that would be helpful for an exchange of information?
Hey, Susan, just quickly, and I got this document last night about 11:45, but moving back quickly to the ESSER funds and that $50 million, I've got the document here, the federal document that was sent to the state, and it specifically lays out uses of funds. And for that $50 million, it is tagged and related to learning loss. So anything under that category of learning loss, and then facilities. And the facility piece, it spells it out, saying preparing schools for reopening, testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings, which are already permitted under the CARES Act. So it looks like it's really specific in terms of, and I'm sure there's some flexibility under learning loss, but as of right now, under use of funds, it's learning loss and preparing schools for reopening, testing, repairing, and upgrading.
Yeah, that's
great. I can send this document to you guys, so you've got it.
Sounds great. That's good. Miss Babb.
I was also going to bring up, and Susan, you might be getting into this, but I know something y'all are probably talking about in special session which is concern for us, is the testing that goes on every year. And I personally am for assessments. I do think we need assessments. I like the annual assessments. However, we've had problems in the past with TN Ready, and this year especially. I mean, we have schools going in and out of red, hopefully less this spring, but we never know when a school is going to be virtual or in person. We have a lot of contact tracing going on in our schools, so we never know actually students being in the building, not being in the building. And when I already look at the disruption that TN Ready usually causes in buildings, as much as the Department of Education tries to say it is very minimal, and I've sat on some committees at the state level that they try to minimize it. If you've had children in the school, TN Ready is always very disruptive to the schools. I mean, it's like they're almost on lockdown for 2 weeks. And when I look at the current situation where we are in with COVID in schools, I just don't see TN Ready being a very successfully implemented this year, which does not mean I'm not for assessing our kids. And we're actually going to have a workshop later this month where I think we're going to talk some more about how we are doing some assessing of our kids in the school system. But I really want y'all to keep that in mind as y'all are talking about testing, whether we're actually doing it or not, and then whether it's being tied to teacher evaluations and stuff. I just think this year is going to be so hard to really truly test accurately, just because kids are coming in and out of schools, teachers are coming in and out. You know, as I talked to one teacher, you might have a kid that was virtual last semester and had one teacher and now is in the classroom with another teacher. It's such a crazy year that I think, especially with the problems we have in our state with TN Ready, this year is going to be a very hard year to really get accurate data with that. And I just hate for further disruptions to go on in our school because they're having a hard enough time just making it through every day. So that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I mean, we have in the fall season, we had several students who had to quarantine for 3 times, you know, because they had been contact traced to a kid. So there's just so many challenges. And so I really think it's, you know, if teachers can just teachers are always assessing students. They're always testing to see where students are. So as they are doing that in their classrooms, and, you know, I'm hoping that every teacher is just working on making sure each of their students is progressing, and not just to take a test, but just to make sure that they're prepared and ready to move on to their next level.
Well, I appreciate Virginia's point about not being anti-test, but just this year, because I remember giving those tests every year, and how if anything weird happens in the classroom, you have to negate the whole classroom's test, because the situation that you're testing in has to be so standard. And we're just not in that situation this year in particular. But also, just in talking to families and teachers, the stress of those tests on top of all of the other stress is just too much for kids. And the scores, based on science and data, the scores are not going to be valid or reliable because of the situation they're being given in. So I think your regular benchmark tests that are given in school, you know, 3 times a year are going to be better suited at determining this than that test at the end of the year.
Just to further accentuate that point, my wife is teaching at Beaumont right now, teaching 5th grade. And just this week, the first week back of school, just yesterday, she went from 18 students in person to 7 because of contact tracing. And now for the next 2 weeks, she'll be teaching hybrid. So she'll have 7 kids in class, and then she's going to have these other 11 online at the same time. So obviously that doesn't provide a good environment to do good standardized testing. I know we're not testing this week, but the impacts of that will continue to carry. So,
if I could add there too, it's especially at the elementary level, it's not just those 2 weeks of testing. It's the many weeks that teachers have to use to teach kids how to take the test, how to bubble in their bubbles completely, how to make sure they're filled in and have no stray marks. And that's an incredible amount of time that, you know, by the time we're adults, we forget how long that really takes. But they are spending time on that weekly all through the year. And that's a lot of lost instructional time.
All right. Is there anything else that, you know, that would be helpful to hear from our side? Well, thank you also. Thank you for taking the time to get together. It really is so helpful just to be able to talk for a few minutes and put faces with names, and hopefully, like Becky said, hopefully we can actually get together and see each other before too much longer.
Yeah, Susan, and thanks. And if we need to even try to set up one, you know, during session, we could do it. We might not be able to get everybody because everybody's schedules are always not in sync when we're down in Nashville, but we can do what we can to stay in touch, because we appreciate what you do. The students are our future. You know, it is hard when you're trying to do budgets, the overall state budget, because you're not deciding between good and bad. I mean, it's there's a lot of competing interests, you know, and we've got, you know, just a lot of significant needs in the state. But you know, the legislature has always placed a large importance and has been increasing funding, other than this past year when we were at a zero-based budget, increasing funds for K through 12 education every year since at least I've been there, very significant increases. I mean, obviously we always need more, and we'll continue to advocate for more. But just know that it's not an easy process, but we're there, and legislators do realize the importance of education and how important it is to get it right. And I think that Jason mentioned that 360, that 100 million that's coming to the schools to help with the early literacy. I always go back to when Morton and I coached softball those years. And if the kids didn't get their fundamentals right, they couldn't really be a good ball player. And if we don't get the fundamentals right at those early years, you know, they're going to struggle the whole rest of the time. And so possibly, I had a couple of educators one time recommended, when we were talking about the reading scores and different things, that if we could put an extra, you know, person in each of like those K through 3 grades, even if you did it one grade a year, to just focus on the reading, and that had the skills to teach them, that would free up the teacher to do something else. And I always thought that was a good idea. So even if that was just done short term with some of this CARES money, that might be an idea. So thank you all. Appreciate, and all my members, good attendance. Everybody gets a gold star for showing up, and I appreciate you, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.